We have an agenda for tonight that reads fairly simply: open the public hearing, make adjustments to the agenda, introduce the planning commission, have public comment, review the April and March minutes, to get a report from the zoning administrator, and then to look at the next meeting schedule for June and adjourn. We'll start with the opening at 7:16 p.m. And I appreciate everybody coming tonight. Are there any adjustments to the agenda as read? Okay. And we'll start with introductions, and again, push the button on your mic so you get a green light and speak into the mic. Bill Irwin.
Nikki Cribb.
Tammy Brennan.
Thank you all. So we have completed our introductions. We have enough time. We'll wait for you, Brenda. And is there any public comment? The words are quiet. And so now we are at the point where hopefully, actually, there may be a reason that Brenda didn't get it, is maybe I'm not connected to the Bakersfield hotspot, Town Hall. Can you share the security key? Were you able to get it, Brenda? You got it? Oh, we're all set. But you know what? Okay. Just in time. What a remarkable set of circumstances. So the first is the April 4th minutes, which are the more difficult because they're longer, that's all. And those are items 1 through 8 with paragraph 4 quite extensive. If you want to try to tell the difference, it also has a date of April 4th at the top. And I'll give everybody a chance to read those since it did just come across your inspection. So John, you were talking about the hotspot? Yeah, where is that at? Oh, okay. So that's how I connected to Brenda. That's good. All right. It's good to know. So there's a public Wi-Fi here. All right. And when everybody's finished reading the April 4th minutes, please let me know. You're good? Hands done. Not that this is a race, not that there's any embarrassment for coming in last, but Tammy, are you done? Oh, thank you. I could use some humor anytime I can get it. All right, do I have a motion relative to the minutes of the April 4th meeting? Thank you, Ken. All right. And any further discussion on the minutes from April 4th? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. All opposed say nay. Any abstentions? Okay, we are approved with those minutes. Now, just as a note, you can't actually vote on this one. Yes. As much as we enjoyed hearing you vote in that last one, you have to hold yourself back for this one. Okay, so March 7th minutes are presented to you, and thanks Brenda for taking care of that so promptly. I know it was- So I'll give you a moment to read those. Is that? Good, okay. Is there a motion for the minutes of March 7th? Thank goodness you did, Tammy, since there was very little option. All right, any further discussion on those minutes? See, people will want to tune in just for the humor.
Joined the meeting.
Oh, they missed all the fun parts.
Public comment?
Okay, so our perspective last month for the zoning administrator. And we thought, and Ken, if you remind me of anything I left out, that they were usual duties of the zoning administrator. For example, the notification to abutters when there's a permit hearing. We hope that it was the normal responsibility of the zoning administrator to post the warning for hearings related to a permit. We were accustomed to that before, but we didn't really know if that was anything that either someone had said that that was customary, or if you had any concerns about doing that.
Thanks. With all due respect to Melanie Riddle, my predecessor, the training was 2 hours in the office with her one day, and there's no way, from what I've learned, that you could have covered a fraction of that in 2 hours. I agree that the abutter notifications, the mailing that goes along with that, the letter that goes out, and the copies that go to the planning board should be inclusive with that. And then the warning specific to the meeting for that hearing, it should be within the timeframe, but I've learned that only since like December till February, so I picked up what we've done. And with that said, I want to have clarity on the days for the warning for the prior. I think we did that the other day. We looked at 15 days for that to be out and in people's hands. I certainly will, yeah, for a hearing. And see, that's where I need to get the clarification, because I vacillate between the two, and
Right.
there's only one correct answer to that. So with clarification of the amount of time of warning, I think that would be a good clarification for everyone. Yeah, I was thinking that too. 15. Yeah, with a mask, you got to be almost on top of these mics, so.
Yeah.
For clarity. That was really one of the few things that I had, but the ability to reference questions that I have during the business day, such as the one I'm going to present to you later. I don't know what my resources are, whether it's the Regional Planning Commission that helped develop the town bylaws, and if they're the experts in what we've got, great. If they're not, then I need to reach out to somebody who has a good interpretation of those and can look at them and tell me where the hell to find the stuff.
Yeah.
Because that's part of the problem that I've got with, in the context of what we'll talk about later.
Right.
So knowing my resources and knowing the timeframes and knowing that one particular abutter that I've got right now, their property contacts 15 different properties.
Wow.
And it's in town, and it is the Gates property that runs behind all of the Main Street properties.
Oh, yeah, right.
So technically, there's a boundary line adjustment. All the abutters have to be notified. And the cost is shared for the mailing between the two parties. So right now, it's the person that's immediately south of the Gates property, and the adjustment is a foot or two.
Wow.
But it includes the line that cuts through the barn of the most concerned property holder.
Yeah.
And of course, having a property line that runs through a structure is problematic in itself because it was built that way.
Right.
It was built incorrectly, so what we'll be looking at from a solution standpoint is an adjustment, which is the most simple and practical.
Yeah. Well, I think to answer your question, and I'm glad that you're bringing these up because I think it's too often that we think that the training between the outgoing person and the incoming person is adequate. And that turns out to be incorrect. That you can come to me to start with some questions. You shouldn't come to the commission as a whole, because that would create a problem with the open meeting law. What I can do is I can give you a response as to my understanding of the bylaws or the town plan. And, you know, as long as it's between you and I think that that's adequate. If I'm unavailable, I think you could ask Ken. And then I think over the course of time, you could ask Tammy or Nikki, but I wouldn't want to say that that would be good to do yet. And at the same time, I hope that they are here with us long enough that they do build up enough institutional knowledge to actually be able to answer questions. So as long as you just reach out to one of us at a time, as opposed to all of us. And then second recourse you mentioned is the Regional Planning Commission. And I think it would be useful when Emily comes next month rather, that we talk about what they can and cannot do for not only us in the Planning Commission, which she is coming to meet with, but you as the zoning administrator, who are a part of the whole planning process, really. In fact, you are the face of the Planning Commission, given that you are here on a weekly basis for business hours, and we're only here after business hours and once a month. So, you know, it makes a lot of sense that you next month take advantage of this opportunity to ask Emily about your specific questions. And that I would hope that the general question would be, you know, call me and I can help you, as long as it doesn't get into, you know, something really extensive. My understanding of the Northwest Regional Planning Commission is that we pay them an annual fee. It's modest. That fee gives us access to them at a modest rate. We can't use them as a consultant for extended projects without actually evaluating how much time is required and what would be an appropriate fee to provide them on a consultative basis for that time.
Just to clarify, Bill,
Yeah,
we pay them a modest annual fee, not for consulting, but for helping out with things that are already on a document that they help develop for us.
I would say that it's not just documents that they have helped us develop, like our town plan and our bylaws, but I think it's more to include the awareness of the state laws and regulations relative to planning.
That makes sense.
So for example, you may have a question about this circumstance of a permit, and you can reach out to them and say, hey, I've got this weird thing I've never come across. Can you help me with it? And they'll tell you right away. Yeah, I can give you the answer off the top of my head, or I can look it up and get back to you. Or this is such a big question that it really needs to be answered in some sort of open public session, because it needs to be heard by more than just you and the person on the other end of the phone, and that or email. And I think that that's always kind of the delineating boundary for all of us for whatever we do. Is, you know, we have these day-to-day things. You've written me and I've replied to your emails about some of these things, and some of them I just don't know enough about the particulars, and I'll try to give you an answer if I know it. If I don't know the answer, I'll tell you I don't. But then there'll be some times when you say, you bring up a topic and I say, that's something for the commission to hear all together. We should put it on the agenda for the next meeting. So that would probably be the third recourse, is that if she can't handle it, I can't handle it, that we then bring it to this meeting. We put it on the agenda and we say, what do we do about it? And we might say, we need to go to the select board and ask for funds to pay a lawyer to research it, or for a consultant, or it could even be that we look for a grant to pay for the work. And that's another thing Emily next month can help us with, is that they are aware of a lot of grants that come through. She may be able to take a question that you have and say, you know what, I can't answer that because it's just too big. It's going to take hours and hours of research. But there is a grant that you could apply for, and we could get it answered through that grant.
Interestingly, I'm not sure that you know this, but the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, we also pay a fee as a town too, and they are a legal authority and they are able to comment specifically. I actually used them on a land issue up the mountain road, and basically it came down to, did you keep track of everything? Is it all chronological? And did your time that you refused or declined an issue meet the state parameters? Because that's the big tripping point with a lot of folks, that they don't do the timing properly. That's why 7 or 15 days is a critical thing. And sometimes 5 days is all that you need for notification on certain things. So it's like, I want to have a chart somewhere that I can just say, this is where we
Yeah,
go.
yeah.
So I think that'll be helpful. And I'll write questions down for Emily. She knows me. We worked together on the Northwest, excuse me. Yeah, the North. I'm trying to get them straight in my mind. The CUD, Communications Union District. They were originally the consultant that brought the CUD into life. They helped in all the planning. So she became a resource for them, and we're familiar. So I'm looking forward to seeing her in person. So I will write specific questions down. Maybe I'll give them to her ahead of time so she knows that we can address them in the meeting, and then everybody will know.
Yeah, I was going to suggest that very thing, that if you were to send them beforehand, she could do a little research. Yeah. And that's what I hope develops between the planning commission and the zoning administrator, is that you learn things that you can teach us, because we are just part-time, and despite Ken's decades on the commission and
Still gotta look everything up.
yeah, it's complicated, and it changes. Almost every year there's something that changes in statute, and the planners at Northwest Regional Planning Commission, that's their full-time job, and so they really do keep up with it. That's the main thing that we pay that fee for, is to have them help us stay in line with what's new. And that's why we're really looking forward to this meeting. And because it really has a lot to do with some of the things that we want to plan for our future.
The rain is coming.
Oh, yeah?
That's the weather alert, yes.
Uh,
Sorry about that.
Oh, that's okay. All right.
That's good. Everything's
Yeah,
tonight.
Is there anything you're doing now that you think should be,
Well, there was,
shouldn't have to be doing, because we should?
no, I don't think so. I think we have a better, this is a job that I've learned as we've went along with Bill's guidance and some of the things that I've gotten from regional planning. So I have reached out before on some interesting issues. And of course, the Vermont League of Cities and Towns, I'm also able to reference them. And in fact, their lead attorney gave me clear and specific instructions on timing and legal things of that nature. You know, it's one of the things where you've been great, because if I had a question, I brought it to you and we answered it. We usually may wait a month or 3 weeks or 4 weeks, but it's fine. And Bill has been. Thank you. Look
I
at
thought it
Bill.
was the throw.
Laid it right in there.
Perfect battery here. We got it. But I'm comfortable with the relationship that we've built and developed
Yeah.
since I've been sitting in the small chair. And it works for me. I like that we have a conversation. We can talk.
Yeah.
And Bill's been good about answering my emails most of the time.
Yeah, well, there's been a few times I know I've let you down, and I apologize for that.
Well, I appreciate your being involved as much as you have been with us, because I think it's good that you're hearing this. It's kind of the same stuff we're hearing, and when we do have people in here.
I mean, the planning and the zoning, I think it's the most dynamic part of what grows the Bakersfield. So it's good to have a rapport and be able to talk. And like Bill said, within the cognizance of actual board business or convening or legal meeting, if he and I do the one-on-one, and that's how we talk about what has to come to the board, then we're not going to be violating any of the open meeting laws. And the reason I email him is because I want there to be a record of what's been transpired, because everything that you do has a ramification or legal meaning. So
And I think as a part of that, some of the things that we would do and have been doing are generate the agenda and generate the minutes. And I don't mind doing that because I've got, as you could see, I could create some minutes in a matter of minutes.
Tammy, I think, volunteered to post. Kind of stuff.
Yes. Yeah, I don't know what the rules are for meetings that are regular. That's the thing. We have a meeting scheduled every month, so. Okay. Oh,
I think it was 48 for a regular meeting, 24 for a special.
okay. So I'll try to get those out sooner, and that will allow for that timing. But thanks for looking that up. And that's the minutes or the agenda or both?
The agenda,
Oh,
to warn it, just to warn the meeting. Yeah, you've got 5 days to get the minutes out there
woo.
after the meeting. Believe me, and I say 5 business days. Don't know if that's the actual.
Right. Well, the best thing for me to do is what I try to do, and that's do it when I go home from here. But sometimes
I don't feel like it.
home
I
and,
know, you don't feel like it.
home and work are like two different places. You have plans for what you do at home, but home tells you that was bad plans. All right, so hopefully that helps.
it does, and I'll write the questions for Emily, and hopefully we'll get some answers tonight, or at least formulate a question beyond this meeting, and that I can maybe ask Emily
Right.
with respect to
Right.
septic specifics.
Oh, wow.
Hearings.
Yeah.
Yeah, I know, that's,
You're having the same luck I had, right?
yeah, I can't find it.
Yeah.
And, I know at some point, the state sort of took over a lot of that septic
Yep.
stuff, so we sort of just let it go at that point, so,
You ready for me to move to the specific question or to talk about that? at this
Yeah, so
point?
this is your part of the agenda to bring whatever you'd like to us.
We have a homeowner down on East Bakersfield Road. Last name is Stone. And they have main dwelling and an auxiliary dwelling, I believe it's called, when the trailer was put on the property next to it. Both had engineered septic systems and approved septic systems. Where we got into a question was that they already have an existing over the attached garage full apartment. I believe that contains a bathroom and a bedroom as well. I think there's 3 bedrooms in the house. I'm not sure what's in the trailer on the adjacent property, but it's all cumulative. But they also wanted
It's
to,
an adjacent property or on the 2.6 acres?
on the 2.6 acres.
It's
so.
it's on the same parcel.
Yeah, on the same property. The wetlands is adjacent to that property. They want to add another living quarters above the existing separate garage that's there. Ostensibly tying it in back into the auxiliary dwellings septic. I don't know how it was rated or if the engineering specifics for that will carry it in the area that they're in. Technically, it's like adding another bedroom to the auxiliary dwelling, I believe, but I think it's on the original house property. Or it's all one property, it's all one property,
one
so.
lot, yeah.
Again, this may be one of those head scratchers to look
Like
at.
It's a wastewater permit question. Has anyone asked the Department of Environmental Conservation what is required?
Not to my knowledge, not yet, because they were waiting actually for direction from me before they did that. And from a permit standpoint, I don't see anything other than, yeah, go build it. If you're
Well,
not-
we actually have to have evidence. It's usually in form of testimony. It can be written, for example, it might be written on a plot, but it's almost always that we hear it from the landowner, that they have applied for or have obtained a wastewater permit for the conditions that will exist at the time that the change is approved and implemented. Specifically, for example, if somebody wants to subdivide a lot, the subdivision new lot has to have a wastewater permit. And the existing lot that that subdivision comes off of has to have proof that they're still under an approved wastewater permit appropriate to what they. Right. Yeah, so we don't generally look at whether they, I mean, here at least, we don't really look at whether they have it. And that might be something that we think about doing in our bylaws.
The actual permit or?
Yeah, because at the Northwest Regional Planning Commission, we have a project review committee that I'm on. And we actually get a signed copy of the document that identifies that they have an approved wastewater permit. And we don't really get that I'm aware of.
No, I mean, Michael Jarvis's, usually their surveys either say they've applied for it or they have it already. and it
They list it right on the document, yeah.
Usually have the spot where it's gonna be if they've gotten a permit, so that's generally been who we've been seeing mostly coming in with subdivision design, so.
But they don't want to subdivide.
No,
Oh.
no,
So
that,
you've got a 2.6 acre parcel,
the two separate,
two separate, and then that's not on town water, or is town water go down there?
I don't think it's on town water. I
They have
think,
a well? So the two existing wastewater permits would have bedroom limitations on them. So if there's 2 3-bedroom wastewater permits and they've got 3 bedrooms in the house and another one over the garage that's attached, and at least one in the mobile home, to add an apartment for a dwelling would assume a bedroom, that might exceed that, and to have 3 septics on there, you have to have it a certain distance away from a well. I don't know if it would fit.
Well, yeah, I think that's where DEC really gets in. They look at their permit for, like you're saying, number of bedrooms, also the overall planning. They look at I forget what they call it, there's a radius around, oh, I think it's well protection there. what they call it. And that separation that you were referring to. But that's again, stuff that we rarely actually see, let alone have a clear, tangible proof of when we approve these. And I've written it down as something that we should consider when we change the bylaws. Should we make in the, you know, the table of all the things that we check off, do they have an actual wastewater permit? Now, one of the things that you might look at is in the files for other zoning administrator work in the past where they've added an addition to a home, or they've actually put another, as you were saying, auxiliary dwelling on it, to see whether or not there's a wastewater permit included in the file. Because I think I've seen some files where there was a wastewater permit in the folder that the zoning administrator had. I might be incorrect with that, or it might have been that on the broad checkoff list that is used for zoning administrator, that there's a place where there's a check to verify that that's been updated. That might be another way that we as a town take care of that. But it sounds like it's a gap that we ought to make sure is not going unfilled, that
Yeah, I'm
we're
not,
thinking you're doing it, you're thinking we're doing it.
Yeah.
And in the end, nobody's really doing it, and we could get a buyer in the future that looks at that property and says, well, everything must be okay, I'll buy it, and then they end up, there's inadequate septic for the number of bedrooms and baths. So,
Like,
Get the address, we can pull that off the state website,
yep,
like address or last name.
oh, perfect, okay. Then my only concern actually comes down to the testimony from the landowner, because if they haven't got that paperwork in hand, their testimony plus supporting paperwork from a certified engineer would be critical, because that's stuff that can be part of the legacy that gets passed on to the new property owner or homeowner, so.
yeah, that's one of the things that we have often talked about here, is that we don't like to consider these permits that come before us for just today. We want to think about that we are establishing some sort of knowledge for people in the future, such that if a new buyer comes along decades from now, there's a record that tells them that when the existing structures were built for the existing uses at the time of a transaction to change ownership, that they have some records that indicate that it should be safe for them to do that. Unfortunately, I don't know if that is always done as effectively as it should.
I could tell you with,
Good compliance.
yeah, what I'm thinking of is we need to modify certificates of compliance in a way that forces the zoning administrator, whoever they might be at the time, to do that diligence and to have that checkoff list and to have it signed off in a way that the bank likes it better.
Right.
And any subsequent attorney that looks at it says, well, town's at fault because they didn't approve the paperwork, or the paperwork was approved without understanding the property better, or what modifications were done to add the extra dwelling. And in particular, this this spot down here now, it's changed hands and it's added a ton of living space with the auxiliary dwelling and the potential apartment over the not attached garage.
Yeah.
And I hope the landowner to
Four
be here.
dwellings.
Huh?
That would be 4 dwellings.
No, 3.
Well, it would be the main house, the one over the garage,
It's
the
okay.
trailer, and the detached. So
Yeah.
4 separate living units.
Yeah, by that calculation, you're absolutely correct.
District.
It's high density, 2.6 acres, so you've got that's 1 acre zoning. So is that per dwelling or?
Yeah, I think it really does require the Department of Environmental Conservation, their wastewater engineers need to look at this.
Because in addition to being in high density, there's also, they're in that blue zone up there on the map.
They're bordering it.
Yeah, they're bordering it.
Their parcel borders that wetland. The wetland and then the provisional wetland.
With all the,
Another good reason to get DEC involved,
Hey.
because
If you look at
They're
their
the ones
wastewater
that-
permits and they're not sufficient, that would be a no right there. And if they want to pursue another wastewater permit, then that's between them and the state.
well, she told me they had 2. One was for the house that existed when the cars owned
See
it.
what the capacity of those 2 are and how many bedrooms they actually have.
The thought was to tie it in with the over garage.
So if there's particular to that septic, if that doesn't overrun the bedroom.
All right, so I got some homework to do, but I'm also gonna formulate questions that I can ask the landowner themselves because they've got some of those answers and you've asked me some enough so that I can suss that out and
well,
bring it to them.
I think it's important to recognize that when it comes to decisions between individual parties, that it's oftentimes best to bring in the review and advice of a specialist. And fortunately, in the state, we do have the Department of Environmental Conservation that has that expertise. They have the statutory authority to help us and to help you. And so, as Tammy said, if you simply say, no, at this point in time, I don't have enough information, then you can ask them to go to DEC to get the proof. And
I think
DEC
that's where that goes.
Yeah.
With all due respect. I
Because
think-
I would never want you to ever think that you have to make a decision that puts the town at liability or creates a problem for lawyers and bankers in the future when we have statutory authority in government who can help us and specifically help you with the proper answer and maybe even proper action, such as sending the people a letter that says you cannot proceed with your plans until you apply for.
You seek resolution at the state level, yeah. That may be a good interim thing, but like I said, I'd like to get a little sharper point on that pencil.
No, I agree. It's a good question. I'm glad you brought it up.
That's it, but I did want to let the board know that there are some significant projects that are going on in town. Right now, one is the removal of tanks at the gas station.
Yes, I saw that tonight.
They talked to the adjacent landowner that owns the garage and the immediately adjoining working property because they share driveway and space. I pointed out that drainage needs to be addressed properly there because they're going to create a lot of space that sheds water directly off the back of that property.
You know the reason why they're doing the excavation?
I didn't get the reason other than that they needed to upgrade the tanks.
Because oftentimes it's that they leak. And if they leaked, that would be, yes, we've got to replace them.
environmental
But it could
law.
also mean that something's occurred. And that would be useful to understand, I think. And again, the Department of Environmental Conservation knows that. They're the ones that inspect the tanks and tell people that they failed. For most of these, unfortunately, most of these gas stations are asked to replace their tanks by DEC rather than they have like a 20-year plan. And at year 19, they decide it's time to change it. They are usually almost forced to do it. So the reason I say that is that it would be really nice to know that there's not been leakage, that there's not something that people there should be concerned about. Almost everybody there is on town water, which should be protected. But if there's anybody that has a well nearby, they should know if there's been leakage there.
There may be old wells that are still being used on the
Correct,
property.
yeah. You got a farm that's been here for 100 years, they may have put in their own well for their animals and they're using that for drinking. And it's affected by leakage from those tanks. It would be important to know. I think generally DEC tries to follow that and tries to notify people that are abutters, but I never like to assume. And at the same time, I don't know, I don't think it's appropriate for us to say that this is your job or for you to think that it's your job. But somebody in town should be looking at, why are they digging up the gas station tanks? And making sure that it's not because they've leaked and making sure that there's not a plume of gasoline there that could potentially affect somebody's either health because of drinking or even the property values because of pollution.
Agreed.
Select board?
One of the things they asked the select board was, do they need any particular permitting to just pull tanks and put new tanks in? And they did not think so. I said, is there any permits the town or knowledge that the town needs to gain? And nobody mentioned the DEC, and I want to thank you for bringing that up. That actually will be a call that I make tomorrow
I can
because
give
they're,
you the name, email of a fellow that does underground storage
Sure.
tanks for DEC. His name is Ted Uncles, UNKLES. You can reach out to him, say, Ted, Bill Irwin asked me to give you an email and ask, you know, what's the town's rights? What's the town's needs for when a gas station's tanks are being dug up?
is it,
The only problems with these are the worst problems. And I think it's really good that you're looking, I didn't know about it until today.
Yeah, I didn't, so it's all dug up down there, is Jolly
not yet,
closed?
this weekend.
Well, the Jolly is open, it's the gas pumps are gone, the gas tanks are being accessed by the ground, there's a fence around.
Oh, wow.
But a lot of times the reason they do this is because there's leakage.
Sure.
Sometimes it's just age.
And I know they have underground monitoring systems with all
Yes, they do.
new.
So from my understanding, I'm not an expert, Ted is, but the tanks have a liner that they sit in. And there's a monitor in the liner. So that if the tank starts to leak, the liner will measure the increase in fluid level at the bottom of the liner. And yet, everything can fail, like some sort of level monitor, like some sort of alarm might fail. If we're really lucky, this is a really good gas company that changes their tanks every 20 years. And they just hit that time and they're doing it, and there's no problem. The concern I have is that it would be nice to know that we don't.
No, I agree that the DEC, if you give me Ted's email, I'll be happy to.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it is just ted.uncles@vermont.gov. I can verify that.
Perfect. Just to carry on a little bit, we've had inquiries about earth-based homes that are built right into a site that will employ geothermal sites.
That email address is correct.
Okay.
Ted.uncles, UNKLES @vermont.gov.
Perfect.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's all right. But we have earth-based homes. One in particular is planned. They haven't told me where yet, but I'm certain that when they asked about permitting, I said it'd be just typical square footage for the living space on that will cover the permit, but there's no specific thing cited in there to cover that. Because if it's covered with earth, partially covered with earth or sod or whatever, however it's grown into the landscape, I'm pretty sure they're going to anchor it in bedrock and use geothermal. They mentioned geothermal and solar energy, which are just touched on in the zoning bylaws from 2017. But we've got people that are talking about installations of potentially large scale installations. So, and I consider that more than a half an acre in a town like this, because that's beyond the single unit consumption, I think, of power. And maybe something that feeds back into the grid. I don't know. I don't know enough about either solar or wind. And I know that you adopted that language into the last set of bylaws, but it's not, as I recall, it's not very specific.
So the Public Service Department regulates energy generation facilities. They have various thresholds of kilowatts for the kinds of permits that are required. And they have varying kinds of relationships that grow out of them. So for example, a small permit, like somebody puts some solar panels on their house, is typically a very small facility, and it's handled by public service through almost administrative process, that it's less than this threshold, as long as everything else seems to be okay with building and location, etc. It's just checked off. Then you get up to, say, 750 kilowatts. It's a number that is used in the ones that I've seen. Now you have to go before the Public Service Board for approval of a project that would likely be allowed to do what's called net metering, which means that the homeowner uses 500 kilowatts and the utility buys 250 kilowatts from the generator. So it's net metering. And then you get into utility size applications. We're talking megawatts, millions of watts as opposed to thousands. That there they have to go entirely through the Public Service Department. They have to go through an Act 250, Section 248 permitting process. And all we've done in town, and this is pretty much all that most towns do, is that when it gets to be those larger projects that have to go to the Public Service Department for more than administrative review, that we want to have them in certain places in town. We don't want them to be popping up like in the middle of Main Street or in the middle of a farm on a view that's protected or near a habitat that is protected. But that was the old way of thinking about protecting the land from 2016, and that's when we revised our town plan. It was on that basis. The administration has changed. That was Governor Shumlin. Now we have Governor Scott. The administration has changed to where they're looking at energy projects differently. And we're likely to talk to Emily next month about what those changes are and how we might even need to revise our town plan to better fit the way the state does this. Because to be honest with you, the way it is and always has been is that when you get into generation of electricity beyond your own the state takes over and has the authority. The towns are given some ability to state their opinions. But generally, if it's not really anchored in what the state allows your opinion to be anchored around, it may not have any effects there's a lot of case law about it. It gets into a lot of litigation, and so you have to be really very careful about anything that starts to get large. When we're talking typical small scale, this is put on somebody's roof, maybe put on their barn, maybe it's a couple of these rotating. Those are exempt, you might say. But when it gets above that, then it needs to be a big state issue.
That's good, good news, because basically what I've told them is we don't have any specific permitting processes, but you may want to check with the state. And this was before talking with you guys.
Did you get the sense they were talking about solar for their own use or actually like a little solar field or something?
Both, actually. The inquiries have come through email to me from a company in California. And then there's some local folks that are looking to install. They didn't say whether it was just rooftop or whether it was separate or external from the property or outside the house boundaries. I referred them to the state because I said, as far as we're concerned, there's no process or money that needs to be exchanged, but that may be something that we look at.
Yeah, it's one of those areas where, because it's utility sized, the state takes responsibility. Because it has more than individual benefits, it has population benefits. And it's where I say it's for the good of the many.
Sure. That makes sense. Last I have for you, honest to goodness, is I've got somebody that wants a pond permit. I see that we charge for them. Can't find the language in there, and it's the same fee for pools as it is for ponds. So in-ground pools or ponds that they're gonna move earth for. Create a hole in the ground. Hopefully it'll be filled by a spring or something.
So there, the fee is for the pond. We have that, you said?
We have the fee, but I don't know if it was a carryover from just people, when Melanie went through and we changed all the fees. I don't know if it was just a carryover, but finding corresponding language within our zoning regulations, I couldn't find it. I spent a couple hours looking through the book and going online and looking, because sometimes it's easier to search by words. I had trouble finding anything.
Pond or pool or.
Yeah, in-ground pool, yep. Well, because the fee was the same, I assume that we were handling water the same way. for the-
Yeah, that's another one where DEC is the statutory authority. DEC has rules about ponds. They have permits. They have certain requirements when you get certain volumes.
Yep.
And also, of course, they look at how it's fed and how it discharges. So, if it's spring fed, it's different than if it is getting fed off of a branch of a creek. And then if it discharges, they have to look at where it goes, because it could create downstream problems. So,
Here's all answers tonight are the state for that. So
Yeah,
I'm-
and-
I'm glad for that, because I haven't given anything as far as we put it in there, but why do we permit if we don't have a bylaw that puts it in our purview specifically?
well, it's really interesting, Brenda. You're digging into all these things. And maybe you've got a different opinion than I do, but I don't think of any zoning administrator has really brought a lot of these things to our attention in the past. And it may be that, one, a lot of things are changing in the marketplace. and they just don't have a lot of history to make their decisions. And so you don't have that history, and so you ask these weird questions, or
Thanks, Bill.
that there are circumstances in the past where people should have asked more questions and we didn't, and maybe that's a problem for us. And it reminds me of one of the things we should think about for this commission is, should we actually bring in a specialist from the Department of Environmental Conservation to teach us what they do and don't do,
Yes,
so that
I
we
think that'd
could,
be awesome.
yeah,
idea.
yeah.
I think that would be
Be an awesome idea.
a good thing. And, knowing what Ted Uncles does as well, that's new, and maybe he's a good place to start with.
I can tell you, DEC is a very large organization. They have many engineers for many purposes, and they do their job really well. I mean, it's funny, they have people that I have called to ask about how much stuff people can leave in their yard. For example, there are actually rules about how many unregistered cars you can have on your property, or how much, if you're whether you're a farm or not, and all these different things that I didn't really understand. But there's a person that's all they do.
Hmm.
The whole state is they answer questions about that, and they actually do investigations too. So
I think that would be a great time to invite the public to come in and ask questions as well, just from an educational standpoint. The only reason I'm asking all these questions is because what's 20 years from now? What's 40 years from now? What's a half a century from this point in time?
That's why you're supposed to update these, regularly,
Right.
because the world's
Right.
changing so fast that we should experience, think about other questions that.
yeah, it needs. Used to be 5 years we had to change it, I think, and now it's 7 years.
I think it's too long.
Seems like it's too slow compared to how
I think
fast.
it's too long. Well, things change, who would have thought we'd have been in the middle of a global warming 10 years ago? There was evidence, nobody was looking at it.
I'm going back to your stone situation down here. The accessory dwellings they've got, and it just says there's one accessory dwelling is allowed. I don't even really know where apartments fit into that.
I know, and I think it has to be like, it's limited to 33% of the whole dwelling, right? The accessory can be up to 30 or 900 square feet. I think they've changed it. But
So yeah, it's
more than that,
spaces. So now I'm sort of wondering, like, can you just start popping up apartments?
Mhm.
A lot of people do that.
I know you can add another building without subdividing, right? And you need a septic for that,
They've already added this.
but they've already done that.
trailer.
Yeah, I don't know.
I think figuring out what their questions are, what their specific needs are, and then having an inventory of what is there on the property for bedrooms and septic capacity from two
Yeah. if they
systems
don't
that are on the
match-
property.
Yeah,
But if it's the DEC's purview, I'm happy to call in somebody and suggest to them that this is the answer as best we know right now, is that it goes to the state for review.
yeah, and I would say that there's a good possibility that you could reach somebody that can answer your questions, but they may not be able to come and visit. I remember Doreen used to actually do site visits to see places, and that was important to her permitting processes. Yeah, because I think when they come in and you talk to them, you get one story. And then you go out and you visit and you take a tour of the building, you start to see. They took an old farmhouse and they made 4 apartments out of it. And have 2 bathrooms for 4 apartments.
I had somebody really wonderful come in and offer a permit for a shed that was on the property they built 5 years ago, and said, we're selling it now. I said, well, when I come up and look, it wouldn't be on any of the documents, and he came in and did the permit, and I said, we're good.
Yeah, the people are living in tiny houses that are smaller than what used to be.
size of a mobile home, for example. We don't even fit into the regulations.
And tiny homes are coming.
Oh, yeah, there's,
Yeah, Peter
Yeah.
King, I don't know if you know where he lives out there in Witch Cat Road. but
Yep.
that was his kind of deal where he was building tiny houses,
yeah,
having like students come and live in.
Oh, he made more than one?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. I don't really know what's going on that property anymore, but.
Oh. And the state does also permit Airbnbs to be taxed at 1% by the towns. I don't know if it's lost revenue to us or if it's something we should pursue, but there's nothing in our bylaws that covers that either.
Right, who registers those? I mean, does the town actually have a registry of Airbnbs?
so the state does. The Department of Health registers all lodging facilities, but there's always a blurry line between what you call lodging and what you call, well, yeah, I just have guests come there once in a while. And it's usually the honest people that apply for a permit to have a B and B because they want everything to be on the up. Those are the ones you don't have to worry about. It's the ones that buy.
I'm
The
sure,
state, I can give you the name of the person that runs the food and lodging program.
yeah, well, yes, let's have an email correspondence. and
Yeah,
I'll get
yeah,
some,
glad
I'll
to
get
do
some
that.
addresses from you. I've overstayed my welcome. Well, yeah, I can let you know about some of that as well. We have our elections coming up for board members and that's coming up May 10th. We currently have, and I tried to get this off of Sean today. We have a purchase order for like 120 something miles of backbone fiber. We're expecting it in September or October. We've talked to MAC and we have permission to store those reels inside at the north garage right now. And some of the stuff that's in there doesn't need to be in there, so we'll look at that. Tractor trailer load of 10 reels is huge. It's huge. One of the communities just got theirs over in the western part of the state, and it's like, holy, there's a lot of them.
Yeah, you can put a lot on a flatbed tractor.
Yeah, so we have permission to store those, and also we're gonna be looking at probably some of the equipment when we get wired up here, and hopefully we'll be among the first towns to have the network backbone, and after that, it goes really quick. We're about to, well, it's public knowledge now, we're contracted, or we will be contracting with Google Fiber as one of our first internet service providers. And they will be providing equipment and installation at a greatly reduced cost, if not free. So we're looking forward to that. And we also have pricing mandates for all these contracts. And it's cheaper than anybody out there right now for 1 gig, up and down.
My friends keep going to Starlink and I keep telling them, well, thanks.
They can go to Starlink.
That's coming, I think, that's why you hear.
Well, and the good thing is, with Heather and myself, we're both deeply involved in it. Heather's on the financing end. I'm in the actual planning phases of it. And I work with Mary Kay Redmond, who is also an employee of the Northwest Fiber Works and is right now somebody, I think you'd call her our chief engineer for outside plant. We got to get a pole inventory in. That can happen pretty quickly. We have to start getting permissions from entities to attach to poles. This is all part of the physical plant, what we're working on. We've already sussed out the generator at the school to provide emergency backup for batteries, because this again runs free of the electrical grid. So it will sustain itself. As long as homes have backup power, just to sustain the batteries for the laser boxes. That's all I call them, but as long as homes have power to do that, you can have a storm and phones won't go out, computers won't go off. But much the way old hardwired copper networks were designed, this also has that sustainability. And also they don't have a date on when fiber wears out. We know when copper wears out because they're fixing it and changing it out all the time. But it's one of the most future-proof commodities out there. So we're pretty excited. Should see some construction this fall. It's a good,
Moving along.
yeah, good time to be in that. As far as ARPA funds goes, I'll just say that everything we have is still in the bank. I did the first report for April 30th. And we've only spent about, oh, I won't quote it on, but we spent salaries for administration, me. Tammy helped out with notes on our one public meeting. And we are forming a citizen group to review requests that will eventually go to the select board to get voted up or down. So the subcommittee will make the recommendation to the select board and vet any of the projects or money that goes out. And right now, almost everything is eligible. The final ruling came out and gave us permission to put it in our town's, what's the general fund, and we write it off as lost revenue. So that's what I've requested happen, but we can generate projects all along. We've got 1, 2, 3 that will be considered by the committee, hopefully sometime in May.
3 other groups that you mean, or
Well, 3 groups that are looking for funding or money. And I think they're all reasonable. When a business goes out or a business in town had to pay their employees their sick time and their vacation pay just because they were asked to stay out of work or the work was so reduced. They went out. I think that's a totally reimbursable expense, especially directly related to the pandemic. When a business leaves town because they couldn't sustain their business model because it required groups to come in, that's another good reason to help that individual out, because they lost money, and so did the business that housed that business. He lost revenue. So there's a whole chain of effect that I'm looking at. My goodness, we got almost $400,000. I want it all gone within the time frame. I don't want to give any of it back.
great, thank you.
That's that. The select board is on board with that methodology as well. So I think we'll have some good public meetings and good public input. Hopefully people will come forth and say, well, I had to buy a computer because I didn't have one for the kid to go to stay home from school. That's an expense. That's a true expense.
So Bill, it's this woman that's coming next month, she's just coming to answer questions, or she's gonna present?
Right. So I'm reaching out to her right now because I just realized I have to be out of town the 6th. Hopefully she'll answer me while we're here. But let me see what she's said about her purpose. So she more likely to have kind of a general interest, not that there's anything specific that she has to talk about. Yeah, let's see if I get her.
Bill, you just reminded me that I will also be out of town on the 6th of May.
So let's blame it on you. It's not me. I'm so glad you brought that up. That's really helpful. Just
On
joking.
the continent, no.
I
no,
will
not the
be in
continent,
England, yes.
Nice.
June 6th?
I leave June 5th, yeah.
So that's near D-Day, Invasion Day. Are you guys going to celebrate? Go down
Is that a
to,
national holiday in England?
Should be.
so she wrote a consultation with us to meet with us. They have to twice over the 8-year planning cycle to discuss town plan, how planning is going in the town generally, and if there are any additional areas where NRPC can provide support. She hoped to meet in May or June. Please let me know which will work. So I told her May was okay, and that didn't work for her. So now June, and how about June 20th for everybody? How does that particular day look?
Fine for me.
That could work for me as the next meeting.
Jet lag, I get back 18th. But I will be.
So you're actually coming back like the day before that or
Come
something?
back 18th.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah, that's quite a trip.
And Bill, what's the date?
June
June-
20th? The nice thing about that is it's not a date when the select board is meeting,
I was
which
checking.
means that there wouldn't be the conflict for. And also, we got people here that are on the select board, or help the select board, right?
Right, Brenda.
John, of course, runs the AV, so we like
I'm
to keep those
secretary.
separate.
So the June 20th would be for the Emily.
Well, that's for, what I'm suggesting is our agenda item is to talk about the next meeting. And the first thing would be to set a date. And because 2 of us can't make it, I'd like to suggest we think about the 20th.
Instead of the 6th.
Correct.
Got it, got it.
Yeah. So is there any problem with the 20th anybody can think of?
I should have the letters out
Oh, yeah.
at the end of the month, so we'll have those people to come in. I don't think there's gonna be any objections to the abutters on that, because they're not losing anything, and we're adjusting. I believe the quantity is 2/10 of an acre, if that much.
So this is the excavate, the structure that's built into the,
No, this is the boundary line adjustment for Vincent and Vincent and Gates, I think it is. Vincent property, which is the old Williams property.
so we're gonna try to get the Vincent Gates boundary line adjustment in the June 20th meeting.
Please.
So
Try to
what we'll do is we'll schedule that for 7. Get that done. And then that would allow us to go from the end of that to whenever we want for talking to them. I don't want to put like a time. So when you talk to the Vincent/Gates parties, we'll shoot for 7 PM.
Yep. Has been. Yeah, there's a surveyed property in there with the, actually the calculation right down to the end. So, should be pretty simple. One of the things I'm gonna ask you for consideration is that we don't notify all 15 property boundary people for a fraction of property that isn't affecting them at all.
Who is this affecting? I'm kind of curious.
Well, it's the Gates property and the Vincent property. And it's strictly between those 2 properties. With your permission, I'll make sure that all the adjacent property holders, the directly and immediately adjacent property holders are notified. But from a resource standpoint, that's a lot of letters to go out certified. They have to pay for it anyway, but I'm not into wasting their time or mine.
Well, I don't know what the rules are.
to be honest with you, I don't know if you have the ability to say you can't notify all of them. You may be required to notify them.
I believe that's the letter of the law.
Yeah. But, you know, as much as you would like to avoid it, the Gates and Vincents may have to pay for all those 15 certified letters. Unless, but I don't think there's any flexibility in
I don't think so either.
notifications.
I'll argue that with my town clerk.
Yeah. Well, yeah,
There'll all be form letters. that'll
We're
be-
certainly not authority having jurisdiction on that.
No, If I asked the League of Cities and Towns, they'd say dot your Ts and cross your Is and all that
Yeah.
good stuff, so.
It'll come back to bite. you.
Oh,
Well, yeah,
That's
yeah.
it exactly.
Yeah.
That's it exactly. So, yeah, I've got them, I've got most of them written down now, so I know who they are. I just gotta, that's gonna be one action-packed, fun day of putting those together.
Yeah. That is real.
Job I signed up for.
Yeah.
Job nobody else wanted.
Well, it's not easy to fill either.
No, but it's far more technical than I thought it would ever be,
Oh, yeah.
and it's required me to go back to the well many times, as you know.
but it's a good place to learn how things work.
This is the bedrock of our towns and counties. I said that before, and I said, if you don't know this job, you have no business talking about property. You're finding that out, right?
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, you need to know.
Bill, I'll even put the ink back in the pen.
Oh, really?
Good- You had a good
Good
backstop
use of the
there.
backstop.
Good
there.
backstop.
So,
Did that answer your question about next, when we meet with Emily? Okay.
Yeah, bring coffee and donuts. We have 20 people in here.
Well, that's something that I think we should talk about is, you know, if we do start to do a new town plan.
first, we're gonna need to get money to do it, because last time we did it, it required us to have grant. I think it was about $10,000.
Yeah, it's a him. He lives on Kings Hill Road, just moved into town. That's great.
Specialties too, or?
All right. So we have a move to adjourn at 8:36 PM. There's a second. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. And we are adjourned. Thank you all for a very good meeting.